what's up? I'm Aisha. Welcome back to the Muse Room, where we talk all things slow self-mastery and how to be your own muse. Today we are going to talk about something a little spicy, which is how to deal with strong emotions and particularly how to navigate through emotions of anger. And to be totally honest, today I am not in the mood to film and record an episode because I, to be quite honest, feel like shit and I didn't feel pretty. I just didn't feel good in my skin because I'm kind of dealing with residual anger from the night before and the day before. But I wanted to really show up and share this episode because I think it's so important, especially right now in a world where there's just a lot of inflammation and anger and feelings of anger that must be coming up for a lot of people and have been coming up for me lately. Our parents' emotional regulation practices imprint on the child. And growing up, I saw anger a lot from my parents and specifically my mother. And I've held on to a lot of resentment towards her for not keeping her cool because it always felt like her storm had to be my storm. And when she was experiencing anger, everything in her path needed, you need to pray for anything and everyone in her path because she was going to take everything down with her. And I think there was just a lot of unawareness on her part because she probably didn't know how to cope with that emotion. Growing up, the anger that I witnessed manifested in a lot of different ways, in screaming, in a lot of impulsive behavior, and aggressive energy, as well as violence, to be quite honest. And I also, as a child and teenager and young adult, felt like I identified as a hothead because people would constantly tell me to calm down or to lower my voice because when I felt angry, it was my default programming to do what I saw growing up and release the anger in those types of ways that were not really beneficial and, if anything, were very self-destructive. So I want to come back to why I wanted to make this episode was I was experiencing intense anger yesterday. So throughout the day, I just felt this heat building up in myself. And as things were happening, as I was getting a text or as I was responding to an email or responding to a phone call and calling my mother back, I felt things just bubbling and bubbling and bubbling, and I just kept pushing that feeling down. I think because I was such a hothead as a kid, and a few years ago I've started meditating and being more spiritual, I kind of was like, I am through being an angry hothead person. That's not who I am anymore. I meditate, I regulate my emotions all the time. But what I realized is that I didn't actually learn how to release anger. I just learned how to suppress anger. So yesterday, when I was confronted with emotions of anger throughout the day, I felt, for example, in the beginning of the day, this heat starting to build, and every single little thing, a text message, an email, or something that I saw on the news, or something that I saw just walking my dog, everything would set me off, and it all started to bubble and cook in a pressure cooker. And it basically came to a head when I had a phone call with my mother, and it was a 15-minute phone call, and that was when I cracked. After I got off the phone, I slammed my phone down on the ground, and I felt so helpless and overcome with feelings of anger that I genuinely felt like my body was telling me I was gonna die. And I needed so badly to release that emotion. So I started screaming into a pillow because I heard somewhere that would help release the anger. I started punching the pillow and screaming into it and thought that would help release the anger. And I started just uncontrollably, like frantically looking for different things to do. I recorded myself on my phone on a voice memo, just releasing everything that I was thinking without judgment. And I was like, I'm just going to get all my thoughts out vocally, and it will help kind of just like let the anger go somewhere else and out of my body. To be honest, I don't know if any of those things, the screaming and the pillow, punching, and the venting on the phone and in my voice notes did anything, to be quite honest, but it just felt like this tsunami that was coming overcoming my body. And I called my husband and FaceTimed him and just told him, I'm like, I think I'm dying. I'm experiencing anger in a way I haven't in a long time, and I don't know what to do. And I wanted him to give me the answers, and he didn't have the answers. And he just said, like, I can listen. I can be here and sit and hear what you are feeling and just hold space for you. And eventually after that phone call, I was able to kind of like just get my blood pressure down, and I got off the phone and I started kind of just doing what I normally do and what I think a lot of us do, which is start Googling and looking for the answers online. I was looking on YouTube for how to deal with anger and coping mechanisms for anger and emotional regulation and all this stuff. And I just didn't get any content that felt true to helping me get through this experience. So I just kind of let it be and eventually went to bed. And this morning, I stumbled upon this video by the great Thich Nhat Hanh, who, if you're not familiar with who Thich Nhat Hanh is he is a Vietnamese Buddhist monk and spiritual teacher, as well as a peace activist, and he passed away not too long ago. Is just an incredible spiritual teacher and leader. And I came across this video on YouTube where he was talking about how to deal with strong emotions. And it felt like the right message that I needed to hear at that time. And I really, really want to share that message with you and share his teachings that I extracted from that video with you, so that when you're going through strong emotions, maybe these lessons and these teachings can help you navigate through them. So the first thing that he says so beautifully about emotions is that strong emotions are like a storm. We have to prepare ourselves for the storm, but most people are not prepared. And so when the storm comes, you feel your fragility and you can easily destroy yourself. So he says that when the storm comes for you, your first response must be to drop everything you are doing. Obviously, some of us have obligations, we're parents, or we have things that are non-negotiable that we have to do. But when you're experiencing a strong emotion, and in this case, anger, committing or following through with a plan or a date that you have planned with a friend, or an event that you were going to, or, oh, I need to write this email, or I need to do this phone call, or I need to finish these tasks, those things can fucking wait, because you're not in a state where you can show up and be present. You have to drop everything and truly check in with yourself and truly be with yourself, because if you don't, if you just try to power through, which is, I think, sometimes what a lot of us are taught, is just like, I'm just going to work through it. I'm just going to push through it. If you really force yourself to push through these tasks or these commitments, you are going to undoubtedly snowball that energy and that anger or that emotion and spread it even further and cause more damage. So if you want to have as little damage as possible and as little debris as possible from your emotion, you have to stop what you're doing. That's his first lesson. The second lesson is, if you look out your window at a tree during a storm, you can see that the branches and the leaves are shaking uncontrollably. The storm affects the top of the tree the most. But the further down you go, when you look at the trunk of the tree or the parts that you can't even see, like the roots, those areas are not affected. If you're just as an observer looking through a window, you don't see the trunk shaking. You don't see the roots shaking or being bothered by the storm. It's really the movement and the discomfort and the chaos is happening at the very top where the branches and the leaves are. So I love that he says this. This is such a beautiful analogy, because he says the safest place is to move farther away from your head, your mind, the top of the body, and into your lower body, and focus your attention on the rise and fall of your belly and deep breathing at your navel. So if we are the tree and our thoughts, our perception, our mind, where we're experiencing a lot of the source of our anger, when we're feeling angry, it's very much in our head. And that's why I think it's even called like being a hothead, because it's just like it feels like steam is coming out of your ears when you're experiencing anger. So he says that we have to bring awareness away from our head and into our lower body, into the navel. And how we do that is simply by sitting or laying down and taking deep belly breaths, and just focusing on the rise and fall of our belly. It sounds so simple that it kind of just seems like, oh, that's not going to work. But I've done it in moments of anger, and it is really such a powerful way to just move your conscious awareness away from the top of your body into the lower, into literally grounding yourself in that emotion. And he says that's the safe place to be. It doesn't mean that the emotion just all of a sudden vanishes and disappears. He's saying that is the safest place to be. And I found this so profound, because when we're experiencing emotion, it feels like our whole body is in this fight or flight mode response, and it feels like our whole body is not safe. But this really just brings that awareness back, and it makes us realize that thought and that belief is false. Our body is a safe place, but we have to just move the awareness away from one area to another that is a safer place to be. And the third lesson from Thich Nhat Hanh's teachings about how to deal with strong emotions is about your inner dialogue. And he says why it feels so painful and unbearable when anger arises is that we believe in that moment we are only that emotion. But we have to remind ourselves that our perception is impermanent. That statement is so incredibly true. When we feel angry, we say, I am angry. And it's as if we're saying, I am that emotion. I am anger. have become anger. I have become that emotion. That one singular emotion is me now. And it reminds me a lot of this quote that I absolutely love from the drag mother herself, RuPaul, which is feelings are not facts. And we have to change the inner dialogue inside of us. And again, it's not easy. And I'm sure it's just like any training in anything. We have to train our inner dialogue and that tape that's playing in our head, because and we have to know that we're the ones who are projecting that narrative and that story. So we are in charge of changing that tape out and playing a new tape. So when I'm feeling angry, for example, if I change it to a different phrase, which he gives 3 really beautiful phrases that I wanted to share. One of them is, I am much more than one emotion. Instead of saying, I am angry, and that play in your brain, change the tape and play, I am much more than one emotion. Another line you could say is, I don't have to die for one emotion. And this might sound extreme, but when you're in that helpless feeling that I was feeling last night, where it was so intense, where I thought my brain is telling me I'm going to die, that statement is the antidote to that narrative and to that story. And the other line he says is, I have survived emotions before. This is really powerful, because when we're experiencing intense emotion and anger, we forget that we forget the past and completely. We're in that present moment and it's coming at you like a truck. But if we can recall that we have moved past it, we have survived, we have overcome that feeling in the past, it changes our perception, it changes our belief system. And we have to remind ourselves that. It might seem obvious when you're not angry to remind yourself of that, but when you are is when you should reinforce that belief. I have survived emotions before, and I will again, because I have overcome it before. And he also talks about when comforting a friend or a partner, he says that he gives a statement that is helpful and useful to use towards your friend when you're comforting them. I wanted to share that for me, when I've gotten a phone call from a friend who was really angry or upset about something, my default was always to trauma bond, because I didn't know how to really be helpful, that maybe listening was enough. But what tends to happen is a friend will call me and say like, oh my God, this thing happened. And I am so freaking upset. Like, can you believe that this person said this? And then I'll just like kind of jump on the anger train and be trauma bond with them and think that it's comforting for me to kind of get them riled up even more, be like, yeah, that was so terrible. Like you're so right. And we're just like, if your friend's feeling jealous about someone or someone wronged them, it's so easy for us, the person who's not even in that situation, but just as a friend wanting to comfort them and just start getting like riled up with them and say like, oh yeah, that person's so messed up. I can't believe they did that. You don't deserve that. You're so much, but like, and then we think that is providing comfort, when in reality, it's not. We're just puffing up each other's egos. And Thich Nhat Hanh gives this beautiful statement where he says, tell your friend, dear friend, you are more than your emotion. You have already survived so many strong emotions. And it might sound so foreign to say something like that, but I genuinely feel like when I get off the phone with a friend after they vented to me about their experience of anger, and I trauma bonded with them and I got them all hyped up, it doesn't feel good. Like, I leave that conversation being like, why the fuck am I angry now? Like, why do I feel like shit? And we've just caused more harm. We've just caused more harm instead of more love. And what your friend or your partner needs at that time is just honestly maybe for you to hold space for them. And it might feel like your impulse to have to say something, or your impulse to feel anger with them so that they feel like they're not alone. But someone else's anger and emotion is not your burden to carry. Carrying someone else's emotion is not going to help them feel less pain or less suffering. And that's what this statement opened up for me and made me realize that I can be more useful to my friend if I tell them and remind them of their resilience and their strength, and tell them that they are more than one emotion, and remind them of the thing that I need to remind myself, that you have already survived so many emotions, and you'll survive this one too. I'm here for you. I love you. It's going to be okay. That can be more powerful and more healing than just mirroring back that emotion to them. So remember, when you survive the storm, when the wave passes, remember to tell yourself, my strong emotions didn't kill me. And next time I will be a little bit more prepared, and I'm not afraid of the storm anymore. Thich Nhat Hanh also goes on to say that you have to be able to smile at your anger. And I found this concept the hardest to wrap my head around. I just heard smile at your anger, and I'm like, what the fuck does that even mean? I don't want to smile at my anger. It felt like emotional bypassing when I heard that. But he just says it so beautiful. He's like, smiling at your anger is not suppressing it, but acknowledging and telling your anger that you are aware of it and you are here to help comfort it. It's so important to recognize things as they are and just be with it. And so what I learned from his teachings, and I feel so grateful that I came across that video this morning, because it helped me really decompress and process those emotions that I had yesterday. I wish I had these tools before, but I can just be grateful that the teachings came when I was ready to receive them. And hopefully the next time I feel intense anger or a strong emotion, I can go back to these teachings and these 3 lessons. What I learned from Thich Nhat Hanh's teachings that I want you to know is that you have the power to experience anger, but not become it. Thank you so much for being here with me and holding space with me. And until the next one, take care.